Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. So you can see my gang's here today, and we'll talk more about to them, whoops, shortly. But this is Suzanne Bryan, and this is a live stream. It is Saturday, July 17th, 2021. Hello, everyone. And my guests are nice Frank. To see you. So you can see my gang's here from the Bay Area. And Inbal. How do you say your last name, Inbal?
It's Gloss.
Gloss. Inbal Gloss, and she's from Israel. And then we have Cindy Dybing. And Cindy, where are you from?
I'm from Seattle area.
The Seattle Wash. So we are representing all over the place here. And we're all going to be talking about Frank's sweater today. And Inbal also has an example of her next ITAG SIS that she's working on there. Mm-hmm. So in the previous episodes, the previous live streams, we've been talking about the different things that you can do with the ITAG SIS in customizing it, which is ITAG SIS stands for It Takes a Guild set in sleeve tutorial. And it's a swatch to sweater tutorial. And we've also been talking about Phrancko.com, the Phrancko sweaters. And that's Frank Jernigan's baby, the Phrancko sweaters, and how you can customize them. The Phrancko sweaters, and it's PHRANCKO.com. The Phrancko sweaters are a standard sweater without any customization other than it will fit your body. But it doesn't have bust shaping, waist shaping, or any sort of stitch pattern inserted into it, which you can do all of those on your own. And that's what we've been talking about. So the week before last, we talked about the neck shaping, the saddles for the saddle style, and how you can insert, like I inserted a lace pattern into the saddle style here. And then last week we talked about bust shaping and waist shaping. This week I'm going to talk a little bit about inserting other stitch patterns in. Like for example, I'm going to insert a stitch pattern about down the bottom. And also about things that you can do to adjust the sleeves, okay? So first, I know that Frank did you do any updating on your, like, information people get with their patterns, Frank, like the square inches?
Yes, the square inches is added. And I also included I modified the instructions for the neckline. And I have, now it says for men, and it has the 1 inch of ribbing that was already there. And then it says for women, you may prefer to do, and I suggested what you said, two rows of purl and then bind off for a shorter curled neckline.
And I'll talk about that too. So actually, let's just start right off with that. Excuse me. So this neckline hasn't had any stitches picked up on it or anything added to it. So this is what the neckline looks like. Some people are concerned that if they add 1 inch of ribbing to this, that it's going to come up a little bit too high and feel like it's choking them, especially for women. But I don't do that type of ribbing on this style of sweater anyway. What I like to do is I pick up stitches all the way around the neck in the ratio that I want to pick up. Mm-hmm. And then I purl 2 rounds and then bind off. And what this does is it creates a roll, because the reverse stockinette's going to roll to the inside of the fabric. And it looks almost like you did an I-cord edge. It gives you that same rolled effect, but it's much easier to do than an I-cord edge. So it's not going to add much height here. It's just going to add an edge. And I'm going to use that same edging at the bottom of my sleeves and at the bottom of my garment. And it's up to you, there's no rule that says you have to do knit 1, purl 1, or knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. There's no rule that says that. And in Frank's the Phrancko sweaters, they provide that because that's the standard way that you would knit a straightforward sweater. But you can replace
it now says there are many ways to do it. And and here's a couple of suggestions. So it's really presented more as, here's a suggestive way you might want to consider doing your neckline.
Right,
but
right.
you can do them however you like, just like any other part of the sweater.
Yes, and a lot of times for ribbing, like my sweater is really plain, other than I'm having the lace go down the sleeves and it'll go down the arm, but I'm also going to have the lace around the bottom. So I've knitted my sweater this far. It's on the knit still. And I wanted it to, and I made it kind of A-shaped so it gets out wider this way. I want it to, I'm going to add the same lace that's here. I'm going to add a panel of it all the way around the bottom. But I wanted to make sure that my sweater was long enough to come over the top of my pants before I started the lace, because I didn't want the lace up here where my midriff is. Now, if you're younger, maybe you'd like that, but I don't, it's not my style. So, and you're knitting your sweater so you can make it however style you want. So I'm going to put the lace, it's going to be probably about 4 inches right here. Now, my lace has a multiple of 12. So then I had to say, okay, then my increases that I'm making for my sweater, by the time I've made the increases I need to also end up with a multiple of 12 when I reach the bottom of my sweater. Where I am right now, I'm at a multiple of 11, 12 minus 4 stitches. I need 4 more stitches before I have a multiple of 12. So you can see on the back here, these are my stitch markers. Do you see those?
Mm-hmm.
There's one for every increase round. So that's where my beginning of the round is for this sweater. And so every time I've added it, and I put the increase rounds every inch. So one increase round will add 4 stitches, quarter around the sweater. So I need 1 more increase round, and I'll have my multiple of 12, which is perfect where my sweater is right now. And then I'm going to start the lace section. So I'm hoping to get that done maybe this evening, because I'm really at it now, and I want to knit. So Cindy has knitted several of Frank's sweaters. Cindy, do you want to talk about the sweaters that you've knit?
Sure. What I knitted them for, I've done 4 of the Phrancko sweaters, and I decided I wanted to knit sweaters for the grandkids, and I have 8 with another one that's due in the next 10 days. So right now I've got 8 sweaters done for all the kids. I'll show the first one that I did here. This one was done for a little 10-year-old, and it's just the crew neck. And she picked out the yarn. And when she picked it out, it was the Anzula Dreamy. It's really soft and lovely. Has a little bit of cashmere, but it was fingering weight. And I was not willing to do a fingering weight sweater for a 10-year-old. It would just take me way too long. So the woman at the yarn store suggested that I hold the yarn double. And so I did. And then this is how it turned out with this. With the nice hand-dyed yarn, it did it really nice with doubling. Got rid of some of the pooling and everything too. And
I love that.
She wears it all the time. It's dark matter is what it.
I have some of that. I love
and
that.
It's just lovely. It's just lovely. And you can see, I think on the bottom too, Frank's has this invisible ribbed bind off where you do the sewn bind off, and it is such a lovely edge and real nice. It was kind of slow and fiddly, but as soon as you get it, it's really, really nice. So that's the way I finished all of them. And then here's one I did for my daughter. She gives horseback riding lessons and vaulting lessons and trains horses. And so she wanted one to work with the horses. Oh. So this is just a Plymouth Galway. It was not a very expensive yarn or anything at all. And she wanted it extra long. and the sleeves extra long so that when she's boosting the kids and leaning and stretching and doing things, it covers her. But she wears the sweater multiple days a week all the time since I've done it, and it's just worn really well. The other piece that she really, really loves, you can see the sleeves here, the shoulder cap, and then how it is with the little sleeves that, no seams or anything. Notice no holes, Suzanne.
Yay!
I watched the videos, no holes. And she just loves this because there's nothing that pulls or pops or anything when she's stretching and bending and doing like that. And yet it fits her shoulders just perfectly.
That's gorgeous. Beautiful
So
one.
she loves that one.
Do you know
And
what the hardest stitch pattern is to get perfect?
stockinette.
Stockinette, and yours
finished-
looks perfect.
Thank you. I just finished lesson 1 with Taming Tension with Vinka, and she said I passed, and it sent me a really nice letter. So I'm skipping because that just came like a couple hours ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's the third one that I did. This was, Frank asked me to test the V-neck pattern for him. And so I did that. And so this was for Gracie is 15, so a 15-year-old, and she is very, very tall and slender. And this was a Rowan pure wool, really nice. Again, a very inexpensive wool, but just it did. And the sleeves, everything just fits her perfect. It was really, really nice. The thing with doing these with the Phrancko pattern for me is I wanted a sweater that really would fit well with the yarn that the kids were choosing and the way that I exactly knitted. Some of the time when I'm trying to match a gauge or have it fit, I've not had really good luck, although I'm doing better after boot camp. And here's the fourth one that I did. And this one, I probably have to go back way far. This is Studio Q yarn, which is a merino, cashmere, little bit of nylon blend. I made it for my 18-year-old grandson. He is 6'1", so it went on and on forever. But I did use your helix knitting, where because it was all the hand dyed yarn. So all of this is 2 different balls always gone together, and then did the color again of 2 different balls of this other color and do so that it does. But I was really happy. The stripes exactly matched up, and again, it did just fit his shoulders perfectly.
So
and this was the Henley. That's the one that he wanted.
I love that. I might do the Henley one next. I really like that. So what's really cool about Frank's sweater, because of the sleeves and shoulders being knit the same time as the body, the upper sleeves and shoulders being knit the same time as body, that you can line the stripes up absolutely perfect.
Get it exactly, and it's just totally straight. It was really nice.
It would be
so
really
they've been real thrilled.
Cindy, do you do any stranded knitting?
The stranded knitting that I did was in boot camp 3. I did my very first stranded knitting.
I'd like to,
but I liked it. It
stranded
turned out
knitting
really good
with Frank's sweater, because a lot of times when you're doing a Fair Isle, sometimes the matching in the sleeve cap and the top of the sweater is not easy to do.
No, that would be hard, but this would be really, I think, very simple, because you've just got just those little tiny bits at the very top of the sleeve for your shoulders, and then after that you're doing it in the round.
Yes, very cool. That's exciting. Well, thank you for sharing, and you don't need to run off or anything. You can stay here.
Okay.
Inbal, you want to talk about what you're working on?
Yeah, I can start with the Frank's sweater because I'm going to knit one, and I'm very curious to see how it's going to work. So I made some designs.
Ooh.
And I'm going to go with this one because I just like you said just now, I think it's going to be really cool to see how well it's gonna be in the round.
Mhm.
And this is my Pearl Soho yarn that arrived. So I made the swatch.
Pretty.
Yeah, I'm just testing several. I just made a stockinette. It's a bamboo, and it's really really drapey and soft. So I'm thinking of this one for the top, for the neckline, and then just start this color work that will become the stripes. And I think this will be a good thing for waist shaping because it pulls. So it's just gonna give me the shaping. I won't have to calculate.
Right.
And the bottom, I don't know. I didn't figure it out yet. But yeah, I think I can start do the calculations and the gauge and get the pattern. So I'm excited.
Fun? Isn't that fun?
It is. It's
It
so
makes
fun.
me want to stay up late knitting.
I can't feel my hands. I'm just all day long just knitting, and I want to see how. And I ripped it out for 10 or more times. I didn't like it, so I rip it out and I knit again, and I can't stop because I know what I want to do. So I'm curious to see how it comes out. So
Right. And do you dream about it at night?
not yet.
I dream about knitting at night. I do dream about knitting. But the other night I dreamed that I robbed a bank, so that was a little bit different.
While you're knitting, right?
It was with one of my knitting friends. So let's talk about your sweater that you have on the mannequin.
Yes, so I'm writing the pattern for the sweater that you saw a few weeks ago. And I'm writing it for, this is linen, and it's gonna be a summer top. And I got the first one, I binded off the triangle and then cast it on for the waistband. But I thought I want something more elegant. Especially because it's linen, and linen, you see the edges when you weave them in. I didn't want that. So I managed to do the whole thing in one go. I did the triangle with the short rows. So I just did the short rows and all the stitches remained on my needle. So then I could just connect the black yarn and go with it. And then the sides, I did one side, then the other side, but when they connected, I just alternate between the yarns. I didn't cut them. So I still have the 4 yarns coming up with me, and then it splits to the neckline. So everything is just done with one go, and I'm happy that it turned out well. Yeah.
So exciting. So this is why I call it engineering with yarn. You're engineering with yarn, you know, and you're figuring out how to connect one fabric to another elegantly.
Yeah, I mean, and also for the if you write a pattern, you want people to to be happy with it, and not a lot of fuss and yeah, I think it's gonna be good.
It's going to be very, very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's see. I want to explain about, someone asked a question about why I would need a multiple of 12 for the bottom of my garment. So let me, you're going to see my worksheet here. I'm going to share my hands and I'm going to explain. Let's see. Second camera. Let's take a look here. So this is the lace chart and all my tick marks for the lace that I'm using on my shoulders. And I got this pattern out of this book, A Treasure of Knitting Patterns by Barbara G. Walker, and it's on page I'll find it. Last time I opened the book, it's on this page right here. It's on page 234, and it's called Diamond Mesh. This is the design that I used. I just used one section of it like that down my sleeve. And she tells you right here that it's a multiple of 12 stitches plus 1 if you're going to knit it flat. And these directions were written out line by line. So what I did is I just transposed those to a chart. I just made my own chart. I followed line 1. It says purl. So here's purl. Row 2, it says yarn over SSK twice, and then you're going to work a slip 1, knit 2 together, pass, slip, stitch over, and so on. And I just charted this out. I gave myself an extra column on either side because I knew that I was going to be picking up stitches for the saddle because this is going to be the top of my saddle. So I gave myself a column of stitches here and a column of stitches here for picking up. So now around the bottom of my sweater, I know I'm not going to be picking up any stitches, and I need the multiple of 12. Right here I have 13 stitches, so I'm going to block this off, and then we'll have, or I could block this off. I have my 12 stitches, and wherever I have this here, this is going to be the double decrease right here. And the reason I need to have a multiple of 12 is so that this pattern is continuous around the bottom of my sweater and it doesn't overlap on itself or run too short of stitches and I have a crazy area. So the multiple of 12 means it's 12 stitches across, and that's going to repeat and repeat and repeat around the bottom of my sweater. And you can do this with any stitch pattern. Now what Inbal was talking about, let me get another piece of paper. What Inbal's talking about on the front of her sweater, the one that's on her mannequin is written knit in pieces. So in this fabric here, she knitted back and forth like this. And then she did short rows. That means she knitted and stopped short of the end of the row. And then she knitted and she stopped short of the end of this row. These are called short rows. It means you don't knit all the way across, and it leaves these live stitches on the edge, on both edges. She's got live stitches now, and she's going to do that till she gets to the point. So now she's got the extra stitches that weren't worked are still on the needle, and they're in this shape. Then she picked up these stitches with the black and knitted this section here. She probably added some increases here and made the black section. Then she knitted this way for the mosaic knitting. Each section separately, but she probably did them at the same time. And when she got to here, then she could go all the way across like that. It is engineering with yarn. Got a funny shape here. But it's, and drawing pictures often helps. So she starts out with her pictures. And then I start out with a schematic. So I might start out, let's say, with the ITAG SIS. I'm going to start out with the schematic. And this is how, and everybody's brain thinks differently. If I were doing this on this, I would draw my design in, which she did, but she has her cute models that she draws them on. She's more of an artist. I would draw my design in, and I would know, for example, here, maybe this is 1.5 inches wide. I know maybe this is 8 inches from here to here. You know, I would know how the dimensions of those. And so based upon my stitch and my row gauge, I know how I can fill that fabric in. So here, let's say that I have 100 stitches across the front of the garment from here to here. And when I get up to here, I'm going to want to have one right up the top. Let's say I have 101 stitches. We want one here. So that means between here and here, I need to get rid of 99 stitches. So how am I going to do that? How many rows, based upon my row gauge, how many rows are between here and here? Let's say that I have 45 rows. Let's say 49 rows between here and here. Then I know at each end of each row, I can be 1 stitch shorter. And every time I do this 1 stitch shorter, by the time I get 49 rows done, I'm going to have 3 stitches left up here, which would work out fine. So it's all just playing. You can do this before you start knitting. Now, some people just try this when they're knitting, and then they rip back. And even if I did this before I started knitting, I still would probably rip back a couple times, because it's an artist. You're an artist in action. And if you've ever watched, other than watercolors, don't watch somebody painting watercolors, but watch somebody painting with oil paints. They will often have something set in. They'll put, let's say they're going to do a vase. You know, they'll put they'll put a back color in for the vase, and then they'll come in and they'll put another color in over here, and then they'll put highlights in here. Then they'll put another color over here, and oh, maybe they're going to change the highlights. So they redo the highlights, and they keep playing with it until it looks the way they want. Knitting's the same way. When you're designing something for yourself, you'll keep playing with it till it looks the way you want. And that's what Inbal said. She had to rip back several times. It's just like on the top of this sweater that I'm wearing. This one, I ripped back the whole top 3 times because the lace wasn't fitting exactly the way I wanted it to. I had to mess with it. In my mind, it was going to do one thing, but when I did the actual knitting, it wasn't exactly perfect the way I wanted it. By the time I got to the 3rd time, then I knew how to line the lace up. At first, I didn't have I want a full diamond right up here on the top. And I didn't start it in the right place. So I started it in 2 different places before I got the diamonds the way I want them to be on my arm. So it's trial and error, and it's okay to do that. You don't have to just knit through one time and have it be perfect. So let's look at gallery view. Let's see if there's any questions over here that anyone has asked, okay? Nice to see everybody. So Anne Scanapiro, she's the one that asked about the multiple of 12. Yes, you would want to end up with 112 stitches. Now, the same thing, that's in the round. So if you had a multiple of 12, that means you need to have whatever number of stitches you have be evenly divisible by 12 with no leftover stitches, or any multiple that you're going to work with. Now, so the next stitch count up would be 156, right? So if 144 stitches wasn't big enough for your circumference that you want, then you'd have to add 12 more stitches and see if that's going to fit. Hello, Fatima. Nice to see you. Nice to see everybody. So anybody have any questions about what we're talking about? It's kind of short so far. This hasn't filled up our time slot. Or do any of the 4 of you have anything you'd like to say? Frank, Cindy, Inbal? You guys are all silent.
I saw that one woman had said that some of it seemed to be a little too confusing or too complicated. And the sweaters that I did with Frank's thing were just very simple, very basic, just stockinette, just following the pattern. So you can start there and embellish as you learn and as you do it, but you can do the beginning ones.
Yes, the way Frank has it set out is anybody could knit it. What we've been adding, what we've been doing this knit along is what we're talking about is what other things can you do? But if you just go with Frank's straight sweaters, in fact, if you've never knit a sweater before, this is a good one to start with. And then once you sort of get the hang of a sweater, then you can start embellishing it with other things if you want and using your creativity. Rona wants to know if I'll talk about my back increases. Now the back increases where I showed you, that's just the marker for the increase rounds. On those rounds, so I have, let me show you the bottom of my sweater. I have a marker here and a marker here and two like that in the back. This is not a marker, that's my button to my pants. So I have these two markers and I have two similar markers in the back. Wherever the marker is on the round where the pins are, that's where I make an increase. And these markers are 1/4 each one. There's 1/4 stitches in between. So let's say I had 200 stitches on here. That means when I first started, before I started making my increases, if I had 200 stitches, that means there was 50 stitches between this marker and this marker, and 50 stitches between the side marker and the back marker, 50 stitches between these two, and 50 stitches between these two. Then when I didn't want to keep turning around because my yarn's wrapping around my legs. When I made my increases for these, I made the increase, this increase, I made away from the center towards the side. So I made make one right here on this side of the marker, knit it across here, and on the other side of this marker, I made a make one left. So the stitches between the two markers never change. That would always stay 50. And the stitches between the two side markers would get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I'm adding fabric out here. Does that make sense? Now you can add it however you want. That's just how I chose. And you can see how the pooling changed. See how the pooling's coming up here? And then when I started adding my increases, you can see how the pooling has changed because the stitch count changes. That affects the pooling on the fabric as well. Does that answer that question? You can put the increases, and we talked a little bit about this last week, and maybe I'll go over it again right now. Let me switch to my hands because this is a good topic.
Suzanne, I think you're about to answer this anyway, but I did see in the forums where somebody asked if I'm doing bust shaping, but I want an A-line, do I start the A-line increases after I've completed the bust shaping?
Okay, let me go to the forums and see what people are asking. I needed to go there anyway. And then I'm going to show some examples on paper. So let's see here. Community. So there's a question. Oh, it's from Demetria for Frank. This is for you, Frank. Separating the sleeves from the body, I'm ending up with 5 more stitches for the front than the back on the saddle sweater. It'll give me no issues. I actually prefer it this way, but just wondering if I missed something in the instructions. That's one question. Okay. She has a second question. Another question for Frank. I'm knitting the sleeves before the body because it's more important to the recipient to have long sleeves than where exactly the crop body ends when I run out of yarn. So I cast it on from the crochet chain for sleeve stitch. The instructions ask for casting on 7 on the body and then picking up 8 from those for the sleeve. Am I right to assume that since I cast on 7 for the sleeve, I'll have to pick up 8 from those for the body? Do you have a video on how to do this? I've always thought we lost 1 stitch on the other second side of a provisional cast on, not gained 1. So let me address that. I got that. Yes, that's a good answer. Let me switch to my hands again, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk some more about the bust shaping. So if you have the sweater, there's the sleeve, the body, the neck, and you're knitting the body over, and you put these stitches on the waist yarn, and you're going to cast on under here using the crochet cast on with a separate yarn. You crochet cast on here. Then you knit across that crocheted cast on. First of all, when you normally do a crocheted cast on, you have your stitches on the needle, the crocheted cast on, like this. And that crocheted cast on is not connected to anything. It's a freestanding cast on. Then when you come from your project, the yarn is coming from a stitch here. Then it's going to stitch into here, here, like this. You're going to knit across those stitches. With the space from here to here creates an opportunity to pick up another stitch. So that's why you might end up with 1 more stitch than 1 less stitch. Normally, when you have a provisional cast on, let's say you have 5 stitches provisionally cast on, and you work them, when you turn that provisional cast on over, you only have 4 stitches to pick up in. That would be here, 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 and here. But I think because the yarn is already connected to the body of the work, and it has to go to, it's going from this knit stitch to this knit stitch, that you're going to have an opportunity right here to pick up an extra stitch. And when I get to my arms, I'll look at this really carefully, and I'll come back and tell you. Now, next week, I need to tell you right now, next week I'm on vacation. I'm going to be in Texas visiting my son. So there will be no live stream next week. Then we'll come back the week after, and we can talk more about the underarms. And we can talk about closing the gaps at the underarm too, okay, which Cindy said she was using. So let's talk. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the different ways of waist shaping and bust shaping and the different body sizes, okay? So if you are high busted, let's say your bust is here, closer to the bottom of your bust being at the bottom of your armpits, doing bust shaping is not going to interfere with waist shaping, because the waist shaping is going to be down here or here or here. So you could do bust shaping up here and it won't interfere. On the other hand, if you are a person who has a larger bust and your bust is down here, and you're doing bust shaping, adding your stitches for your bust, yes, it can interfere with the waist shaping. So when I have, and this is probably more common than this, and is more of difficult to figure out. So let's just go straight to that style. So let's say your bust is here, and you want to add waist shaping. You want to have bust shaping. Let's say you're putting your bust shaping in here, and you want to add waist shaping. The bust is too low for you to add waist shaping in the front, because the waist shaping should happen, if you can see where it is over here, it would be happening in here, right? In the wrong spot. What you would do in that case is you would use the side waist shaping on the front for the front waist shaping, and on the back of that same garment, this is the back, you would do the waist shaping in here in the back. And so it'd be in 4 places, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that pulls fabric around from under the bust to the back, and it actually is very attractive. Does that answer the question? Can you hear Frank? Let's give him a minute to reply. Can't hear Frank. Why they can't hear you? Let me try to figure that out. Okay, can you talk now, Frank? It'll take a minute. Okay, let's see here. Oh, I wonder what happened. Can you hear me? Oh, bummer. Okay, I'm looking at where my built-in microphone, internal microphone, that's what I'm choosing. Speaker, should be the speaker. Silence. Let's put everybody on the screen. I don't think that should make a difference.
No, I don't think that's it.
Okay, everybody talk now.
At once?
Yeah, well, let's all
Yes.
talk at once.
All of us talk at
We're
once.
talking. Can you hear us?
No, my microphone is not on mute.
Emily said yes. So yes, you can hear us, or yes, it's mute.
Okay.
Nothing from Dimitri.
Now it says your default speaker is changed to eCam Live. We got some sort of message again on YouTube. I don't know what that means.
Well, it shouldn't affect anything.
It shouldn't, I know.
Affect anything.
Well, they apparently started.
Oh, now they can hear,
Yeah,
Frank.
they can hear us
Now they can hear. Yay!
Who knows?
Wonders of technology.
Yeah, I didn't change anything. So it was a glitch. It was a glitch. I'm sorry, we had a glitch. Okay, so let's see where we left off. Where did we leave off? What were we saying when the sound went out?
One answer that I gave that they didn't hear was when you first started talking about picking up the stitches under the sleeve, and you read a question that somebody wanted to do their, I think it was Demetria wants to do her sleeve first. So she picked up stitches for the sleeve and wondered if that was going to change how the body was. And my response was, I would not have done it that way. I would have knitted the instructions exactly as they're specified in the pattern through picking up those stitches and maybe one more round just for good measure, and then put the stitches on a holder and go and work on the sleeves.
Yeah, and I would even maybe do like an inch on the body, because I found that any time that I'm working directly under the underarm, like when I go to try something on, when I'm trying this on, I don't just do the first round where I connect the sleeves and the body and try it on, because those underarm stitches get stretched way out of shape. And you really can't tell how it's going to fit you, because there's no structure to those stitches. So I knit about an inch down past where the underarms are connected. Then I try it on, so that there's some structure to the stitches. Otherwise,
and then when you pick up the sleeve stitches, it will work exactly as it says.
yes.
And there will be one more picked up for the sleeve than there was that you cast on for the body.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, Dimitri says where we left off, Frank was answering the question. So I think that he just answered you again. And even if, let's say that you did pick up one less stitch or one more stitch, that's not real significant. It's not real significant. And on the body of the garment, if that one stitch is an issue, you could either do an increase right in the middle of the underarm, or you could do a decrease right in the middle of the underarm, so that you get back to your original stitch count. You could do that on the very following round, and it wouldn't affect anything really. So, any other questions? Now remember, there's no live stream next week, but you can still ask questions on Ravelry, and we'll be back the week after. And if anybody wants to share their sweater, let me know. I'd love to have you on here to share your sweater. I think it makes it really fun for everybody to see other people's work. Carolyn Finnerman says, Frank, can you speak to seed stitch and gauge?
What about seed stitch and gauge? Can you use it for the sweater? Of course. What's the question?
I don't know. So
you can use any overall stitch you want. Just knit your swatch using that pattern if it's an all over pattern, and then use the gauge of that swatch with the pattern to enter it into the website to get your number of stitches.
Okay, so Dimitri said she didn't hear the answer to the first question. The answer to the first question, Dimitria, is he would like to know the number of your pattern. On the very last page of your Phrancko pattern, there is a pattern number, the very bottom line. And if you can give that to Frank, he will look it up and read about your saddle and see if there's an issue with the directions. And so you need to let Frank know that number and that you asked this question, and you can email him. So Diane Sinclair says, I'm knitting Frank's sweater for my husband and the shoulders are a bit narrow. Can I just cast on more stitches at each shoulder, or will it affect the rest of the sweater?
It would affect the rest of the sweater. And I want to ask, how much of the sweater have they knitted to determine that the shoulders are too narrow? People often think that and then find out that it really works.
Especially after it's blocked. Blocking makes a difference too.
Remember, the sleeve is set in, so there should be a seam that goes up from your underarms to the top. So your shoulders are only this wide, not this wide.
Exactly, especially for a set-in sleeve. So a set-in sleeve, usually you follow the clavicle to the end of the clavicle, and that is where the top of the setted sleeve should start.
Oh, Caroline is saying when I do that, I don't get yardage.
That's for the seed stitch.
That must be about the seed stitch.
Yes.
I do not calculate the yardage if your gauge is too far different than a typical stockinette gauge. I simply can't estimate it. That's why I'm now providing you the number of square inches in your sweater plus a 5x5 inch swatch. And you could follow Suzanne's instructions she's given before. Maybe you'd like to repeat those to determine your yardage using the square inches of your sweater.
So, Carolyn, to figure it out, how much yardage you're going to need for your sweater, you would knit the 5x5 inch swatch. And you don't need to count the stitches or anything. It's not about gauge. You'd knit a 5x5 inch swatch and you would weigh it. And then you figure out how many square inches are in the sweater. And Frank's going to give you those square inches. So let's say you knit a 5x5 swatch and it weighs 2 grams. That's probably a lot, but I'm just using it. So you would say 5x5 would be 25 square inches, right? 5 inches by 5 inches is a 25-inch square swatch. So you would divide 2 grams by 25. And that gives you how many grams you're getting per square inch. So 2 divided by 25 is 0.08 grams per square inch. Then if Frank gives you the square inches of your sweater, let's say it's 650 square inches, you would multiply that by how many grams you're getting per square inch. So if I have 0.08, I'm going to multiply it by, what did I say, 650? That's 52 grams. So that would be half a skein of yarn. So obviously our numbers weren't right, but it gives you exactly how many grams of yarn you'll need for your sweater. And that's how I, when I'm creating sweaters for myself from a swatch and a schematic and I don't know how much yarn I'm going to need, that's how I figure it out. It works every time. And then I always add 10% for error and swatching.
Oh, Suzanne, you said you're gonna talk about multiple patterns. Like if I'm using several swatches, like several gauges, actually.
Yes. So let me talk about that. That's a good question. Let me go to my hands. So more paper. Okay, so let's say here's your sweater. And that you're going to have this part over here be moss stitch. And this part over here be moss stitch or seed stitch or any kind of background stitch, okay? So if you know this, let's say that this right here is 4 inches and you want it to be halfway. So from here to here is 2 inches. And this looks like it's going to be 4 inches here or 6 inches. And we'll make this a square to make it easy for math. So we know, well, let's say it's 4 inches. There's going to be 4 inches wide, this section, 4 inches wide, and let's say 20 inches long. So we would say 4 times 20, that's 80 square inches in that section. And if we're doing that on both sides on the front and both sides on the back, then we know we're going to have 320 square inches of moss stitch. And this is just for the body. You'd also, for the arms, I do the same thing. Then we know what, let's say that this is 20 inches across from here to here, and we used 4 and 4, that's 8, so there's 12 inches. This is going to be 12 inches. And that we're going to put a cable pattern in here. It's 12 inches by 20 inches. Let me use my calculator, 12 times 20. So that's 240 square inches on the front, 240 on the back. So it's going to be 480 square inches of cable. And this is just on the body. So if you've got your sleeve here, I put both sleeves side by side, like this. So that I can make basically a rectangle out of this to figure out my square inches for the sleeves. Now, of course, there's this extra fabric in here. That'll give you some extra yarn. And if I'm going to have my stitch pattern, let's say that I'm going to have my cable be here. And my moss stitch here. And let's say my sleeve is going to be 20 inches long. And this part here is 8 inches. And this part's going to be, let's say, 16 inches. I do the same thing. I make it like this, so it's easy to measure. I put these two, so I'd have these two parts of my sleeve. This is getting skinny down here, this part right here. And the opposite, going this way for the other side of the sleeve, that's this part here. And then I can use those as a rectangle and figure out how much yarn is going to be in, how many square inches for the sleeve for the moss stitch. I add all of that up. So I have my moss stitch and my cable stitch. Then I do 2 swatches. I do a swatch in the cable stitch, a swatch in the moss stitch. So this is my cable stitch swatch. Here's my moss stitch swatch. I measure them and weigh them. And I figure out how many grams per square inch that I'm getting for each fabric. Then I multiply it by the square inches that I need for how much of that fabric I need, add them together, and that's how much yarn I need for my sweater. It's really not hard. I mean, this is just homework. It's homework you do before you start your project. I would give the one that requires, I would average yours. I would draw your pattern out because you know what your schematic is going to look like, right? I would draw it out just like this and average them and give that stitch and row gauge. So go with that one. But like, let's say most of it's in moss stitch, the cable's going to use more yarn than the moss stitch is. Right. So you could just average them. If 30% of it's going to be this and 70% is going to be this, you use your stitch and row gauge. They give this a weight of 70%, this a weight of 30%, and figure it out. I would just average them. This is what I love about knitting. I know a lot of people don't like to do this, don't like to get this in depth, but this is what I absolutely love about knitting. Yes, yes. You, you still have to start out with this. You would have to figure out what percentage of your sweater is going to be what gauge, stitch, and row gauge. If you're going to have more than one stitch and row gauge, you need to figure out what percentage of the sweater each is going to be, and then weight them. Okay. Were you able to see the demonstration that I did? So you guys didn't see the demonstration I was doing. I was drawing. You can't see that.
I
On
think they
YouTube.
got the demonstration. It was just when you were talking to Frank and stuff at the end that they couldn't hear that.
Okay. Okay.
They can hear you. They can't
This
hear anyone
glitch.
else.
I've never had this glitch before, and we've done this every week the same way, so I've got to figure it out. There's always something new to learn, let me tell you. Is anybody hearing all of us now?
Are you hearing me now?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now they hear us. Yeah. And they said they did see the demo,
Okay.
Suzanne.
Okay. So what Inbal's also asking is what stitch and row, if you're going to be using multiple stitch and row gauge in your garment, which one do you choose to put in for Phrancko's garment to put into the computer? I would average them. I would do the same thing that I just showed about figuring out what percentage of your sweater is going to be this stitch and row gauge and what percent is going to be this stitch and row gauge, and then I would weight them. I give them a weighted average, and then that's what you would enter into Frank's program, and it should spit out the proper amount of yarn. But the problem is, where is the stitch and row gauge? Spit it out. Where is the stitch and row gauge difference is going to be? Let's say that you're using one stitch and row gauge that's going to be up around the armhole area, and a different stitch and row gauge that's going to be down on the body of the sweater. The one that's going to be up in the armhole is going to be affecting how, if that's the one you put into your system, that's the one that's going to affect the directions for the armhole. But if you put the one in the system that's for the body, then your armhole's not going to work with the stitch and row gauge that you use in that area. It's kind of tricky. It's kind of tricky. Maybe it's not something that works with his thing. You know, maybe it needs to be that if you're going to have something in the armhole area, maybe that's the stitch and row gauge you need to use. Because what's the most important part of his directions is the shoulder and the armhole shaping. So if you're going to have, like, for example, Inbal in your sweater, let me make the sweater that you have up here, back here, since that's what's around the armholes, that's the stitch pattern that you would use. That's the stitch pattern that you would use to put in for the whole thing. Does that make sense? Any other questions? So we'll have to figure out what the glitch was this week. I got 2 weeks to do that. But we haven't had this problem before, and we've used all the same elements, so I don't really know. Who knows? There's an alien in my computer. So any other questions? So I would like to thank you all for participating. I would like to thank the people who are watching and online for participating and for being here and asking your questions. And I hope this helps you. You know, Frank has his Zoom right at 2:30 today, and you can join that as well. And it's Phrancko. If they just go to your, yeah, just type it in over there, Frank. Thanks.
There, I put it in. I don't know if anybody can hear me, but they can see the link.
You put it into the YouTube?
YouTube chat, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Frank put in the address for his Zoom that is at 2:30 today. And you can ask questions on there, although it's not an educational Zoom. It's more about just socializing and knitting together. But Frank would probably be willing to answer a question or two.
Oh, well, that's also a purpose of it. I do answer a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So no live stream next week. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. It makes me very happy. Give us thumbs up. Share this with your friends. It's okay to share it on Facebook, on Ravelry, or anywhere where you go for your social media. And come back week after next because we're going to talk about the sleeves. We're going to talk about picking up the stitches under the sleeve, doing a design in the sleeve, and different sleeve shapes. Okay? We'll see you next week.
Thank you,
All right,
Suzanne.
thank you. Thank you for
Bye-bye.
helping me, people.
Thank
You're
you
so
all.
awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.